talk to you, but the way I live got priorities put in place. I'm a real good kid. You can be cool with me, but just understand I am loyal to my future and I have a master plan. I'm giving all I have to my schoolwork and this is cause my future's in my hands, can't you see? I have a master plan, graduate, oh yes I can. I go to college and then I will get a good grade, boy, yeah. Study and stay up late, boy, yeah. I won't even get A's, boy, yeah. You know I too many things, boy, yeah. Oh, in the same breath, let me say that I'm trying to expand my brain. You can't distract me, baby. I need to educate.
Good evening, and my name is Mike Haney. Welcome to 60 Minutes in Black USA. I'm glad you all could join us for this very compelling conversation that we'll have today based on the inequities in education. Have two very wonderful special guests. They both have been with us before, and we said that we would do this second part series and begin to talk about some of the fixes in education. So I want to bring in first Andrea Gar Barnes. And then here is Justine Medina. Justina and Andrea, how are you all doing today?
I'm doing well, Michael. I'm doing well, and it's good to be here. Thank you for having me.
Good, good.
Same, thank you, Michael. I feel just that video in the beginning has me energized and just ready to get to talking about what we're here to talk about today.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, there is hope. There's no doubt about it. That's why we're here to talk about that. But before we understand the hope there is, we've got to understand what the issues are. And first of all, let's let the viewers know who you are. Besides two wonderful human beings that I had a chance to connect with, let them hear from you who you are and what you do and what makes up your life. Andrea, you want to go first?
Sure, I'll start. As you can see, my name is Andrea Gar Barnes. I work at Boston University Law School. I also have a consulting business. I'm an entrepreneur where I do diversity and equity consulting work. And I work with schools. I work with institutions of higher education. I work with nonprofits. I work with corporations, small companies, and doing what we call equity roadmaps. And the equity roadmap is taking a look at where is the company at currently with equity. It's not just hiring Black and brown people. It's not just hiring women. It's looking at your environment and seeing how not only how you can hire them and attract them, but how they can thrive in your business, right? Because the bottom line is having Black and brown people in your business makes you profitable, not for just the numbers, but because we look at life through a different lens. We walk through life, we move through life with a different lens. So if you want to be innovative, then you need different people who think differently, understand the problems differently. And so I help businesses to get ready for that profit and non-for-profit. For me, most importantly, though, I am a mom, I'm a grandmother, I'm a member, I'm a fifth generation resident of New Bedford, Massachusetts. My great-grandfather came over from the West Indies as a stowaway on a whaling ship when he was 16 years old for a better life, so that his children and the descendants after those could have an education. And so I think of that often. And I also think of that my mother's family, that's my maternal side of the family that came over from the West Indies, which I don't know why we don't talk about it, but a young African-American woman was doing her dissertation a couple of years ago, came to New Bedford based on the research and found that my family was one of the few Black families during slavery that wasn't enslaved, that lived in New Bedford. And so that was something really that I, often wondered why we don't talk about that. And also talk about education and how education can be the balancing factor in many of our lives. It's not just about getting a college degree. It's what, for many of us, that college opens doors to networks. It provides access to different people for just experiences that maybe we weren't aware of. And so I think that's some of what Justine and I will talk about today, a bit of how we create sustainable, transformative access for Brown and Black students.
Wow, that's powerful. I can't wait to get to the conversation. Before Justine introduces herself, let's make sure that if our viewers would like to ask questions or pose questions of either of you, they can put it in the chat. I'll put it up there so that we get a chance to see it and address any questions that you may have. So please, if you have any questions for either Justine or Andrea, please put it on the chat. Justine, go for it. Who are you?
Hi, how are you? My name is Justine Medina. I am also a resident of New Bedford, Massachusetts. I am a Cape Verdean American woman who has spent the majority of my life living in New Bedford, which has a lot of ties to my culture. And I feel very fortunate to have grown up in a place where culture matters. And so, in speaking of that, I did my undergrad in New York. And I remember going there and people always assuming, that I'm Hispanic. And no disrespect to Hispanics, of course, because my children, I have Puerto Rican. I am the mom of two. But it mattered to me to talk about my identity and to explain to people that, no, I'm not of Latin descent. I am a Cape Verdean American woman. And they always, well, what's that? We've never heard of that. And I'd go into the whole explanation of islands off the west coast of Africa. So my culture is something that is very important to me. I've been in education for the past 15 years as an educator, starting as a teacher in the South Bronx, which is, and I was a career changer. I went to school for social work. I've always known that I wanted to be in the business of helping people, helping my community, making a difference. So I started in social work and decided that, no, that's really not for me. Decided education, because like Andrea said, it's for me why I can sit here. Oh, I'm so sorry. I have puppies here. It's for me why I can sit here and speak to you and talk to you from a place of a professional status, because education, like Andrea said, is that balancing factor. And so I've been in education for the past 15 years, started as a teacher, I transitioned back home to my city of New Bedford, where I then became an assistant principal and then a principal, and saw a variety of things that we're going to, I think, delve into today and talk about. In addition to education, I also own a nutrition club because I'm very passionate about fitness, health, and wellness. I believe that it's important to be just spiritually, physically, emotionally sound. And so that's something that's very near and dear to my heart, being an entrepreneur and having a small business in my city. And again, just helping the community to know, to be healthier and happier. So one more thing. I have recently taken, I'm on sabbatical leave from my position as a principal because, as Andrea said, DEI work is very important to me. especially after this year of a pandemic. So I am currently a search and consultant with Carney Sando and Associates, a firm in Boston. I'm a part of their DEE practice team. And so I've been doing some work with independent schools on the search side, finding DEE directors, and doing some consulting work. So that's a little bit about me. And I'm going to put these dogs aside.
Hey, that's fantastic. So first of all, we must be live from New Bedford, Massachusetts. Both of you are in New Bedford, Massachusetts, and that has always been known to me as a wonderful fishing community, right?
Yes, we have the richest seaport in the nation.
The richest seaport in the nation.
Yes.
Wow, didn't realize that. But they also have Justine and Andrea up there as well. And so we know it's a wonderful community. So let's delve into it. One of the things I want to show, I want to stay in Boston for a minute, and I want to show something that was produced and use that as a basis of our conversation that Harvard Graduate School of Education put out that talked about how COVID taught America about inequities in education. So I'm going to read a little bit of the excerpt, and this was done in July of this year, so it's very fresh. So Unequal is a multi-part series highlighting, and this was produced by the Harvard faculty, staff, student, alumni, and researchers in issues of race and inequality across the U.S. The pandemic has disrupted education nationwide, turned a spotlight on existing racial and economic disparities, and creating the potential for a lost generation. Even before the outbreak, students in vulnerable communities, particularly predominantly Black, Indigenous, and other major minority areas, were already facing inequality in everything from resources ranging from books to counselors to student-teacher ratios and extracurriculars. Okay, so we know, and this study is a wonderful study. If you want a copy of this study, either look at the Harvard Gazette, July 21st of this year, for the study, because it's phenomenal, it's fascinating, and it really focused on the disparity in technology. So I want to start the conversation talking about that, relevant to what you as individuals, maybe the institutions. Andrea, we know you're the director of diversity, education, and what's the third E stand? What does E stand for, Andrea?
Diversity, equity, and engagement.
And engagement. So, Andrea, in addition to working at Boston University Law, you've also worked at Bridgeport State College. You worked at Western Kentucky. So you worked at four-year institutions in addition to graduate schools such as Boston University. So you get the matriculation of children from secondary schools. So I want to talk about that. I want to talk about what it is that you see as the lack of resources that you saw students come to you with, and where it is present, even in light of the pandemic. And maybe, Justine, you can answer the same question relative to what you saw when you were a principal.
It's a really good question, Michael, and it's actually it's a multi-layered question. And so if we're talking about students getting to either the 2-year to community college or to the 4-year, we have to really take a step back and look at not just high school, but looking at middle school, right? And I would even say elementary school, but I'm going to leave that to Justine. And I'm going to say that, that many of the students that I have had either the opportunity to work with or students that you see in the research, that there are certain students that are deemed as college material. And then there are other students that are not seen as college material. And why is that important? It's important because there are certain courses that one must take in high school. And actually, there are courses in middle school that prep you for those courses in high school in order to qualify to meet the basic minimum requirements to go to college. right? So many students do not find, there are many Black and brown students who are the first in their family to go to college, right? It's not until their junior year that they then learn that they haven't been taking the courses to be able to qualify to go to college. Now, there's nothing wrong with community college, but imagine what that feels like when the other kids in your class are all preparing for college for the 4-year school, and then you find out that you don't qualify, right? But you've been meeting with guidance counselors, but no one has told you what courses you need to make sure that you take, right? So when we're talking about what are some of the resources, there's a program ongoing. There's a study happening in the city of New Bedford as we speak. And I actually got asked to facilitate that study, but honestly, I just couldn't do it because of other commitments. And we're looking at the fact that, for instance, New Bedford, English is not the primary language. Justine, would you say that's fair? It's not the primary language spoken in this city. But yet, in many of our schools, the teachers, the school adjustment counselors, the guidance counselors, no one speaks Spanish. No one speaks Cape Verdean Creole, right? No one is speaking Portuguese. So here are the large numbers of students, underrepresented students, Black and brown students, right, who they speak English, their parents do not, right? So how are you engaging? How are you telling me that you're committed to engaging me when you're not speaking my language, right? And even though my language is English, that's my primary language. But if you wanted to reach my mother, because I'm the first in the family to go to college in our immediate family, right? Then you needed to be at church. You needed to come to the church and to speak to the congregation, to talk about not why college was important. Parents know that, but how do you get your child engaged, right? How do I get my child ready? How much is it going to cost me? When are applications due? When should I be applying for financial aid? What are some of the free summer programs that is going to make my child not only have a stronger application, but to be prepared, you know? And it's not happening. It's not happening. And I hear what Harvard is saying, but I would disagree. I would disagree, because I would say that many Black scholars have been writing about this for years. This is not.
So you're saying that it isn't a result of the pandemic. It's been happening ongoing for a number of years. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely.
And I also hear you saying that there's some accountability on families and communities outside of the bureaucracy of education to be accountable for getting some of the information to our children, our students. Are you saying that as well?
No. What I'm saying is that, yes, there's some accountability, Michael, but here's the thing. My mom didn't go to college, but wanted it for me. But there were different avenues in my community. And I'm going to say to you, the Black Panthers made sure that certain information got into the churches, got into the community centers, so that people like my mom could then get the information to me, right? So I think that oftentimes, yes, there's accountability on the part of parents, but on the systems, and especially the public school systems that we're paying, that you're using my money for, right? That the accountability lies within that system to get the information to the parents, so the parents can then hold their children accountable. And the way that they do that is by developing partnerships with the schools. And I'm just gonna drop this, like this nugget, if you will. I think that, you know, I have friends that grew up in the South during segregation, right? Sorority sisters and men, brothers that are part of fraternities and the Masons. And they will say, and this was always interesting to me, it took me a while to kind of understand this because I grew up in Massachusetts, right? But they said that that segregation and for Black students and for education was the best thing for them. They felt the schools were better when the schools were segregated because their teachers went to their church. Their teachers shopped at the neighborhood supermarket. Their teachers lived in their neighborhood, right? Their teachers were people that their parents grew up with. And once that changed, and also that their teachers knew the community and knew the families. For most of us, we don't have that anymore.
You know, I had that same experience, and I want Justine to weigh in as well. When I was growing up as well, the teachers living down the street that told my mother they hit me with the ruler because I was unruly, you know, and so there was a community that raised us. Now, Carter G. Woodson believed that, you know, in spite of the fact that we may have had segregated school with Black teachers, it was about what we were educating. So even though we had segregated schools, what were we educating as Black teachers and as Black administrators that was relevant to the needs of our community and our children? Justine, you are a principal, even if you are on sabbatical in elementary school. So you're preparing the children to go on to post-secondary education, if that's where they go. So what do you see? What are your thoughts relevant to that? What are some of the resources that you feel are lacking or are there that, you know, we need to know about or either enhance?
Well, I 100% agree with Andrea that these issues have been written about. They have been discussed internally in communities and in schools. And so when we see, you know, the Harvard article about COVID, what I can say is what COVID did personally for me is it highlighted the inequities. It really, they were so glaring that I could not ignore them anymore. So when you talk about technology, this pandemic shut down schools and caused students to now have to learn remotely. It made teachers lose their minds because now they're going from being in person in front of students to now having to navigate all these different programs and technological supports to now stream teaching into the homes. That brings on a whole level of disparity that we knew was there, but now we need. So now we need Chromebooks that are in the homes of students to have access. Some of these families don't have Wi-Fi. So we give them a Chromebook. The Chromebook is half the battle if they don't have Wi-Fi. Now we're trying to figure out how do we get Wi-Fi into the homes? And I think some school systems, they worked with Comcast and different organizations to do that. But now let's shift into the schools, because it's one thing once you get the students set up at home. Now, I was working in a school that's over 100 years old and didn't have the capacity to have the Wi-Fi capabilities we needed. So I'm going to tell you that there were 20 days that I had no Wi-Fi connection in my school. So we got it into the homes, and the school up the street, the school down the street, because they may have had, their newer schools, or they may have had renovations. They're not having the same issues that I'm having. My kids are already, they already have huge gaps in their learning for a number of reasons. One being a language barrier, which Andrea also mentioned. Many of them have immigrated to New Bedford. So there's that piece. And now as the school, I cannot provide you with the education that the kids up the street, down the street are getting, because my building doesn't have the capacity to get to have, and it was alarming, to say the least. We talked about attendance, trying to get kids to log on, making sure they were, and I said to my central administration, my Wi-Fi has been chronically absent. 20 days and of trying to scramble and get these kids online and tell my staff, oh, I need to send you home or to another school. So what I feel the Harvard article brought up was some of these things that we know existed. Now it just highlighted them. It really did. Technology was a big one. Social emotional factors. They talked about the counselors, the needs. There are people, we're in a pandemic. People are sick. They're losing their jobs. They're not working. Some of them are sick and they're dying. The impact of that had on students, socially and emotionally, was daunting. And then when we finally got to a place where we started bringing students back into the school and just expecting them to adapt and adjust back into the school setting, many of those resources that were needed, if kids are coming to school in survival mode, they're not ready to learn. And we have to address that first.
So Justine, you said something that I caught. You said that you couldn't take it anymore, and it sounded like you may have done something about it. I heard those words, and then when I looked at the statistics recently about the number of teachers and principals leaving school jurisdictions and systems. So to go back to a system that I'm very familiar with in Baltimore, in May of last year or June of last year when grades came out, the average grade point average of students in Baltimore City was less than 1. It was 0.7 as a result. A national statistic of 42% of households had access to digital access, which means that 58% didn't, and most of them were in minority communities. So my question to you, and Andrea, you may want to weigh in to this as well, but Justine, you're close to it as a principal, right? Does the system, when you look at it from a historical perspective, as you and Andrea mentioned, does the system really care about educating kids in certain zip codes and jurisdiction, or is it just lip service that we're getting? And I'm whispering for a reason. Is that too controversial for you to answer? I don't want anybody to,
No, it isn't. It surely seems that way. I felt as though there are things that just should be, and as Andreas mentioned, this is public education, tax dollars, and yes, in cities like New Bedford that have a high poverty rate, there's a lot of Chapter 70 money that flows into a city for funding. But the distribution of that funding is questionable. And I've questioned it. I've said, who makes the decisions of what schools get what money? Is in a city like New Bedford, like many other urban cities, there's a south end of New Bedford, there's a north end, there's a west end, there's the housing developments and where they are. And to me, it was very apparent that my school that served a large population of English language learners, 3 housing developments along with a homeless shelter, was very much lacking many things that just should be the norm in every school. When we
Wow.
talk about equity, where is the equity and who is calling the district to say, why does the school up the street look like that and this school looks like this? And that's from an aesthetic. Never
Wow.
mind everything else that goes with it.
Wow.
And that's something to kids. When you walk in a building and you see a facilities that has not been renovated in years, I could go on and on. What does that
Justine, you're absolutely right. But there's a statement before we go to a mini commercial, and I got a question for Andrea, and then we're gonna come back to you. The Harvard study said in the long run, that kind of attitude, I don't know about the one that you just displayed because that's real and compelling, by a principal, because you're a principal. You know, the buck stops with you to a certain extent, with the exception of the funding in most cases in the school. That attitude by a principal can make a huge difference in the success of the school and the teacher's desire to stay, right? This study said. So with many of your frustrations, is that something what kind of led you to decide that you wanted to take a bit of a time out from that situation?
Absolutely. And one thing I can say is, despite the facilities, I worked very hard to uphold a culture and a climate of excellence, of belonging, of importance. But there's just so much, Mike, that you can handle when it comes to safety, when it comes to just resources, when you feel like you're pleading and it's falling on deaf ears. Because like you said, the resource piece, the budget piece is something that, you know, as a principal, you would think that I hold a lot of, you know, decision-making power, but there are certain things that I just don't have control of. And the powers that be, it's almost like a Band-Aid. Yes, yep. We hear you. This is going to happen. And after 4 years, I felt, and like I said, the pandemic just really did it for me. And I had to step back because it was almost like I was passionate to a fault.
Well, you know, we're going to get to some of the fixes because you were part of some of the fixes and some of the positive aspects relative to educating parents, communities, school boards, and you were part of a wonderful program. And I just want to, as I said, we're at the halfway point of our program, and just a bit of a infomercial. You know, we're on the Black USA Network, a network that is national in scope, broadcasting out of Oakland, Chicago, New York, Baltimore. We've been in New Orleans, in Florida. And so we want to make sure that our viewers understand that one of the things that Donnie Glover, the founder of Black USA News, developed this for is because we believe that we need a medium of media and communications to get out the information that the viewers are hearing now relative to crime and justice, politics, education, economics, that we can look at and make decisions ourselves as minorities or majority minorities, as they describe in that Harvard study. I don't know what that means. I got to go back and look at that. But that this media medium is something that we can look at and trust for our information. Someone said something to me compelling, I believe it was Andrea, that there's a lot of these podcasts popping up all over the country. People are sitting home, but they're not always credible in the information that you're getting. So be careful in terms of doing the research with data and information that you're getting. So on the Black USA News Network, on Monday through Fridays at 10 o'clock, we have Mr. Donnie Glover himself with the morning show. In the evenings at 7, we have Quita, Chap, and Dason at 7 p.m. in shared spaces. Donnie Glover has a show on Tuesday, Sister Biz on Wednesday, Black Business Roundtable, a compelling show from Oakland, California, on Thursday, Black USA Crypto News with Kamal Hubbard on Fridays and Saturday, the Blackout Live from Harlem, New York, and on Sundays here 6 p.m. 60 Minutes in Black USA. So that's the infomercial on Black USA. If you're interested in a subscription, because these things have to be funded somewhere, we don't ask people. But if you're interested in advertising your business or entity, please, email me or email Donnie Glover. His information will be available before this show is over. But Andrea, just to get back, because I want to highlight some good things that are happening in education. We can talk all day long about things that are going wrong, but you're the director of engagement. You're the director of equity. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
As you educated me on, diversity is a number, but the equity and engagement is actionable items that actually measure and show whether things are happening with the numbers that we're getting. Talk about some of the things that you have been able to be involved in, or you have developed either where you are or at Bridgewater or at Western Kentucky that the students seem to embrace and do better as a result of.
Okay. All right. I'd like to start with that. One of the reasons why I accepted the position at BU Law was looking at some of the way that some of the strategies, the innovative strategies that they used to disrupt inequities during the pandemic. So students no longer can come to school, right? We had closed down the Commonwealth. Well, the dean of the law school then not only purchased and shipped laptops to students that didn't have them, but she also purchased internet services. We have students not only all over the country, but all over the world. Now that makes a bit more work for staff, but it's what the students needed in order to be successful. I remember the story about an administrative assistant at BU Law who did some research, was researching how to purchase a desk for a student. I think the student lived in Chicago who didn't have a desk at home where that student can study, right? That's how you disrupt inequities, is giving students and oftentimes when you're talking about underrepresented students, you're talking about Black and brown students, and it's not all Black and brown students, but it certainly is. There's an overwhelmingly higher number of Black and brown students amongst first generation college and professional school students, right? And those numbers also, they come from modest income families, right? Families who have this understanding that, okay, baby, you got accepted to law school. We want you to do this. We're so proud of you. I'm going to have to pick up some extra hours at work. Dad's going to have to pick up some extra hours. Auntie said that she'll throw in a little bit of money, but you're going to have to go to the library or to the computer center to use the computer there. Because if your computer breaks down, because this is all we have and there's no extra money, right? So now, when it comes to that, the students can't come on campus, what are they doing? What are they using? It's not enough to say in the year 2020 or 2021, we expect that all students have laptops. Look, you read my story, right? When I applied, I had to write an essay. I told you my story. And so now nobody planned for the pandemic, but you accepted me knowing my story. So now you have to put the strategies in place that are going to supplement my story, not so that I can survive. I am so sick and tired of hearing folks saying that we want Black and brown students to survive in community college and med school and law school. Damn it, no, we don't. We want them to thrive. We want them to thrive. We want them to be like, I can't think of her name and I'm getting upset with myself, but the young sister that was running lead on the Moderna drug that's out of Johns Hopkins, a young Black woman, right? We want them to thrive. You can't come up, you can't reach your full potential if you're worried about surviving. Right. But when you put supports in place so that I can thrive, then I can begin thinking about the impossible. Right.
Andrea, my family, I'm 18 years old. What can my family, or maybe even my secondary school, when I go to an institution like Bridgewater or University of Maryland undergrad or Western Kentucky, what can I do? Do I seek out an Office of Diversity, Equity, and Engagement? Do I go to the dean? What can I do myself to ensure that the resources that I need, like you said, based on the fact they asked me and accepted me, how can I be more proactive to ensure that I get mine?
I would say it would go even before the student begins the school. I'm going to take a bold step and say to Black students, to Latinx students, if the school that the schools that you're looking at, make sure that they have a Black Student Union or a Center for Multicultural Affairs when it comes to undergrad. If they don't, that probably is not the place for you to be. Because those centers for multicultural affairs, those Black student unions, those are the places that you can go to and say, look, I'm confused. Can you show me? They took away my financial aid, or I don't understand my financial aid. Or how about this? I didn't say this in the beginning because it just kind of feels like bragging. But even though I don't technically work with undergrads, I'm known in the community for that. People will call me. And I remember it was about a year ago speaking to a young woman, excuse me, a young Cape Verdean woman that had gotten accepted at Bridgewater, haven't worked at Bridgewater more than 10 years. She received financial aid, everything. She received a book stipend. Everything is online now. She didn't know how to access it. Someone else had reached out to me from the community because this young woman had been in classes for 4 weeks, didn't have her books because she didn't know how to access it. Right? She had money there. She didn't know how to access it. And, that assumption, I reached out to folks at Bridgewater. I said, hey, look, I said, one of my kids from New Bedford is in trouble. And somehow or other, you all don't know about it. You got to take care of her. Don't make me come up there, right? They started laughing, sent me back an email where they were laughing, said, give her my name, give her my cell number. I did. She called me up later that evening crying, saying, I can get my books now. You know what she said? She said, my mother didn't graduate from high school. I felt so stupid going in to say to them, she said, saying to them, basically, you gave me money. I don't know how to get the money out.
Wow. That is powerful. Andrea, final question before we move to you. Not final question, but another question for you. For Black, Latinx, Cape Verdean student, HBCU or mainstream school, does it make a difference? Where would you point a young person in secondary high school? Would you tell them, hey, you need to go somewhere and get some culture? Are HBCUs doing a great job of educating to what the mainstream universities are? What would you suggest?
Okay, I think you'll like this. So in the business, we call them PWIs, predominantly white institutions.
Okay, I'm writing it down. PWI.
PWI, which is predominantly white. I knew you would. Predominantly white institutions. We call them PWIs or an HBCU. And I would say it really not only, and it's so complicated. It depends on the student and it depends on, I would say, the major. And it depends on, like, do they want to go to a large school, a small school? What are they going to school for? I will say to you that Fisk University still graduates the highest number of Black doctors, right? So to me, and having been in that area for a bit, for about 4 or 5 years, I know that Fisk University, amongst their students, their medical students, they build a family. But I'm also going to tell you that there's a sister who's an amazing physician. I call her the Queen Doctor of Healing. That is the Dean of medical students at BU's medical school is Boston Medical Center. She's building a community, a family, right? So you want to look again at those schools that have people in those positions if you're going to a PWI, right? If you're
Wow.
looking at a predominantly white school, right? Like, to me, it's no different than, why would you go to Bridgewater State University if your intention is to be an engineer and they don't have an engineering program? I would not want any of my children or my grandchildren to go to a school that did not have an undergraduate dean of diversity.
Right. Thank you. Hey, I'm going to transition to Justine. Justine, I want to pull up this video about you and a very special program as we talk about fixes and some things that, each of you have had the ability to influence. I want to pull up this video and show this video that you were part of.
I have my script, right? Because I came prepared and thinking what I wanted to say. And then I watched the video and listened to George's story, and the whole notion of helping kids reach their full future potential. How can they do that if they don't even know what's out there? If even the guidance counselors or the educators don't even know the fields to lead the kids into. So I just think this is an amazing opportunity to spread the word. The STEAM Mural, what that did for our kids is it just sparked an interest. It looked cool. It was graffiti. It was like, what is
Let's let that thing.
that on the street, a busy street in the West End in the center of New Bedford? And then they wanted to know what it meant. What does that mean?
Science, technology, engineering, arts,
I'm just really excited about this whole campaign.
So, Justine, let's talk a bit about that and some of the influences as a principal you have. We know that you were one of the best, if not the best principal in the state of Massachusetts. You had at the rate of 92% attendance for your kids, and you were in elementary school, but you got your kids to school, and that's half the battle won, is getting to school. And as you mentioned in here, what's the vision you paint them so they can get to a point of where Andrea is and be able to recoup some of the benefits of that system? Talk to us about some of the successes.
Well, yes, right, because there are successes, and it takes people who are passionate, who are dedicated to the community, to come together, right, to talk about the issues and then come up with solutions. So that STEAM the Streets project, that was with a friend of mine, Ben Gilbarg. Parents are amazing people. They actually were Bridgewater State professors, ran the Coalition for Social Justice, and their son launched this program, STEAM the Streets, which was to get kids interested in STEAM fields: science, technology, engineering, arts, math, in a way through technology, and allowing them to explore, have mentors. So he got Black and brown folks who were in the field to come and talk to the kids about how they got access in. And that's what Andrea was talking about, the access points. We first gen students who, we are being left to navigate systems. And that's my saying, you don't know what you don't know. So you need people to help you, whether it's the DEE directors, whether it's mentorship programs, whether it's college bound programs like Upward Bound, whether it's right now in my field that I'm working in with this private firm, it's these independent schools. They put kids on a whole different trajectory. And there are programs that help kids to understand them. And I think it's our job as the community to make sure that these programs come to New Bedford, that they're in the schools, that folks like Andrea and myself are demanding that we get the kids are given access to get to the higher educational institutions. Well, as I listened to Andrea, I was thinking, fraternities and sororities, once you get into that network. And so when you're talking about encouraging students, that's a whole network of people that are now your sisters and brothers that are going to help you through your whole life. And there are just these things, I was instrumental in starting a parent-teacher home visiting program, because many of the staff in New Bedford, they're not from New Bedford and New Bedford Public Schools. And so they're not really a representation of the students, right? We talk about what happened when desegregation of schools, and that's a whole nother thing. But anyway, I felt as though, and that was from my social work background, if people knew, if they got a sense as to what students are faced with each day, they'd have a better understanding of how to bring that into the classroom, what to do in the classroom. We talk about homework. Homework was so punitive. When you have students that are home cooking, cleaning, helping younger brothers and sisters with their homework or whatever, does it really matter that now we're going to punish kids because they didn't get their homework done? What else? How else can we address this issue? With the pandemic, I think what the best thing it did with the technology and streaming into the homes, teachers got a sense of these kids in high school who were saying in the chat, "Excuse me, Miss Brown, I need to go help my younger brother or sister because they're having trouble with they're having trouble logging on, or they need help with their teacher." And what it did, it is giving people a sense of what our kids are faced with, that no, it's not about lowering expectations. It's about actually making sure we're doing things to engage them, making sure their culture, culturally relevant material is in the classrooms, that they're reading books that look like mirrors and they're seeing themselves in these books. So you want to talk about things we can do? We can make sure that the resources in the classrooms are helping kids to form their identity, because it matters, and it is our responsibility to do that. We can make sure as parents that you are going to groups and attending the school board meetings and advocating for your kids, because it's public education and parents are the biggest the most important stakeholders in the whole, but they don't know it. They don't know it. In some areas they do. And that's why those schools are renovated and they're not having Wi-Fi issues, because those parents are hip and woke. How do we make sure that we wake up the parents who care, but they don't know what they don't know? And that's the thing. I think that there's a lot that we can do. And it starts with things that we're doing right here. Talking about the issues, coming up with solutions, because, it's just, I could go on and on. I'm looking at the time. I'm just like, I want to be.
Well, listen, you can go on, but because you're absolutely right, because I think we need to hear it. We have to stop blaming everything on systemic issues that we can influence, to your point. School boards are a very powerful tool, and who's on our school board and how do we hold them accountable? But moreover, how do we organize? Both of you are parents, right? That have educated or had to be part of the education process for your children. Both of you are work. You have jobs, you have professions. In most cases, more than one job. Andrea mentioned she's the CEO of a private business. Justine, you have a nutrition company. You're working with a company that does DEI consulting, as well as a principal. So we can't continue to use the excuse that we're too busy. Is it a matter of us prioritizing what is important, relevant to our children's education? Even if our parents haven't gone to school or to post-secondary school, how do we hold ourselves accountable? And that's the final question for each of them, because they can't have excuses when I look at you two. There's no excuses. How can we hold ourselves accountable? Go at them. Andrea, you go for it. How do parents and moms and dads, how do we hold them accountable for the education of their children instead of always looking outside for the blame? How do we fix that?
Andrea, I thought of something as we're talking about school boards. You know, voting in our city is very low. You know, it's low when we're voting for a presidential campaign. Never mind local offices. I don't think people realize that school board members are elected officials. That's one thing. I think parents, you need to vote. You need to vote. These are people who are hiring the superintendents, who are making the decisions for the schools. What schools they sit and they decide, they approve or they disapprove what money goes where. You need to take that voting of school board members, city councilors, seriously. It's not just about a presidential campaign. It's local. I think that's one way is you need to make your voices heard. You need to get out and vote so that you need to read about the people who are running for these offices so that you're aware of who we're putting in the seats, in these decision-making seats. So that's one thing I will say. That's I think a practical.
Andrea, what do you say? Do you endorse that, or is there another strategy you as a parent would do when you see inequities in technology and resources, etc., regardless of someone's socioeconomic situation? There are things that we can do. Name another thing that we can do as a community and as a people.
As a community and as a people, I think that we need to go back to partnerships with the YWCAs, the YMCAs, the community centers, the Boys and Girls Clubs, places like that. We need to put pressure onto our public community colleges, our public 4 years. You know, I'm going to go beyond public because I think one of the best kept secrets, for instance, in Massachusetts, Harvard gets state money, MIT gets state money, schools like that get state money. We need to put pressure on them to develop sustainable, innovative, transformational partnerships with public schools in depressed area. They need to start funneling back some of that money that they have, some of those resources, some of those networks back to their partnerships with the public schools, right? And then from there, those partnerships need to influence the school boards, and they can do it, and they have done it, and it happens in certain areas. But this is a whole nother show, but when we talk about parents, we also have to think about that many families are working 2 and 3 jobs because one job does not have a sustainable wage, right? So it's very difficult to go to these meetings and to be involved. There's a little bit of me that feels like that's very intentional, right? So that folks can't get involved. I've got to choose between going to a school board meeting and picking up an extra shift so I can pay the mortgage, so that I can pay for the tutor, so that I can put food on the table. What am I going to choose? I'm going to choose putting food on the table, right?
Well, it sounds like a vicious cycle, though, what you're saying,
Exactly. Exactly. But the thing is, if I don't go to the school board meeting, then me picking up the extra shift isn't really working either. And that's intentional, right? That's intentional.
Absolutely, because the education, if we want to stop the cyclical poverty, generational, education is the way. You know, either post-secondary or some sort of, work, because everyone doesn't go on to post-secondary, but there has to be something meaningful. And we as a community and we as parents have to buy into our children's education. So I'm going to say, as we wrap up, we're in our last minute, and this has been phenomenal. And you're right, you guys have got to come back, is that we have got to take more ownership. So if I have one takeaway from our show tonight, in terms of how we can be more results oriented and how we can get further along the line is that we as a community, as parents, as people, in addition to holding our elected officials and our school board officials accountable, we have to be involved regardless of our circumstances economically, work-wise, etc. We have to get involved because we're at a major point in our lives, in our community, where we're beginning to see, as it said, a generation of kids. It is said that a generation of kids could be lost educationally as a result of this pandemic. This is Mike Haney with 60 Minutes in Black USA. I'd like to thank Justine and Andrea. You will see them again for joining us today. And we look forward to seeing you next week at 6 o'clock. Justine and Andrea, thank you so much again for joining us on Black USA.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.